And welcome back to my channel, unless you're new here, and then it's just welcome. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And yeah, we are going to talk about now the I Know What You Did Last Summer trilogy. This is the 4K Blu-ray digital release. Now, of course, I don't have a 4K player. Who knows if I ever will. But this was really no more expensive than having to find the old release Blu-ray on its own. I certainly wanted to upgrade my DVD of it. So this is the 25th anniversary 4K, and I'm very glad to have it. Now, it was released in 1997. It was directed by Jim Gillespie. It was written by Kevin Williamson and Lois Duncan, and it stars Jennifer Love Hewitt, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Ryan Phillippe, Freddie Prinze Jr., and Heche is in here, which is very hard seeing her. The Gillespie guy from Roseanne. But yeah, it's kind of really hard to, whenever I see a movie with Anne Heche in it now, I was watching that day that she died, and I was watching like the live coverage when they were putting out the fire in the house, and I have never seen anything like that except in a horror movie. If you have not seen it, like, when it happened that morning, TMZ and all of them was all over it, and those news reports and that helicopter. It was totally kismet. In other words, they didn't know that this was going to happen. But when they got Anne out of that house and they were wheeling her towards the ambulance, she was completely covered up in what almost looked like a body bag, right? And the copter was like zoomed right down on top of that thing. And she busted out of that bag, and she sat up, busted out of the bag and sat up. And I've never seen anything like that except in some kind of horror movie. And so I wasn't prepared for that, like when it happened, it was like, oh my God. And now whenever I see her busting up out of that bag. So, wow, that was... So yes, Anne Heche is in this. A little side note there. So, I Know What You Did Last Summer. If you've never seen it, I'm amazed. But the movie opens, we're in a very beautiful coastal setting, on a coastal highway, and we see a guy sitting on the edge of the cliff. We later find out this guy is David Egan. So he's sitting there, and obviously he's in a very... It looks kind of obvious that he may be going to top himself. So he's sitting there, and the fireworks all go off. We then are at this town celebration where we are at a beauty pageant, and we get to see Sarah Michelle Gellar, who plays Helen. She is competing, and she gets crowned the queen of this beauty contest. We're introduced to Barry, who is Ryan Phillippe, Ray, which is Freddie Prinze Jr., and Julie, who is Jennifer Love Hewitt. So we're introduced to them. We're shortly also introduced to Max, and him and Barry start having a little fight. Before takeoff, they go to the beach and have some drunken beach activities. They're all, of course, graduated, and they're fisting to go off to college to their various, Barry's going to go to college. Helen's going to go to New York to become a serious actress. Julie's going to go to college, and Ray's going to try to do something, but he's the poor one of the bunch. There's always got to be a poor one. All us poor people have to have representation in these movies. So they take off to the beach, and they leave to go home when they hit what they think is an animal, only it turns out to be a person. He's very disfigured. they start panicking. This will destroy our lives. So they decide to cover it up. Now, Ray being poor and Barry being extremely rich are the two that are driving this. You're going to destroy our lives. Helen and Julie really don't want to, but Helen gives in, and then finally Julie gives in as well. So Max pulls up, thinks they've had a flat tire. They hide the body and lie to him. And then he takes off, and they do. They take the body down to the pier to dump it in the water where they know the tides will take it out to sea. And it wakes up. So you get your first little jump scare. You know, it wakes up. They push it in the water anyway. It's got a hold of Helen's tiara. So, or he. I don't know why I called it. But it becomes it by the end of this trilogy anyway. He dives in to get her tiara back. So, you know, they then carry on, and we flash forward to a year later where Julia is coming home. She finds out that all of them have really failed, kind of. Helen is back. Ray is like now working on the docks. And Barry is back after flunking out and causing all kinds of mayhem because that's his job in this movie. So, once Julie gets back home, almost the very day that she shows up, she gets a letter addressed to her. And in the letter it says, "I know what you did last summer." So that's what begins the problem. She ends up going and hunting down Helen. Of course, everybody's sort of separated because, you know, who wants to be around a person you was involved with in something like that? So she tells Helen. They end up going to see Barry, where they kind of accuse him, but then no, okay, it's not you. So they start thinking, well, it must have been Max, because, you know, Max had showed up in the truck that night. They accuse Max of doing it. He doesn't know what they're talking about. Well, they don't go. Barry goes in and starts a fight with him to scare him because he's sure that it's him. They end up finding Ray, who's now a fisherman. Julie tells him about it. We then get our first kill, which is poor little innocent Max. When he is gutted through the throat over those crab pots by, I just call him Hook, you know, the fisherman, Hook. I just gave him the name Hook for expediency's sake. So Hook gets him, and he is murdered. We then get to see Barry being stalked at the gym that he likes to work out in, which is... and his jacket is stolen, and a picture is left of his car outside. He then hears it crank up. He goes outside. The car rams him, chases him and rams him, and knocks him through a building. So he's hurt pretty badly, but not like super seriously. But he felt it. I'll put it that way. He definitely felt it. So he wakes up in the hospital. The four of them all talk about it. And, you know, should they tell the secret? They instead decide to try to find him themselves. They end up going, you know, Julie has researched and knows that the boy's name was David Egan. They look it up and end up going to his sister's house, her and Helen. And this is the part played by Anne Heche, which was very nice. Yeah, I mean, she was good. She was creepy, but she was good. They tried to get her, you know, maybe if we can know about this guy, we can know who's taking revenge for him, because that's what it seems like. So she doesn't really know much about him. She didn't know many of his friends. She did say that a guy had stopped by, but she couldn't really remember anything about him other than Billy Blue. That's all that she could remember associated with him. It wasn't, is that necessarily his name? She doesn't know, but that's all she can remember that comes to mind when she thinks of him, because this was a year ago and she's kind of a little nutty herself. So they decide that maybe they'll go and try to find this Billy Blue person. Now, we see Hook in Helen's house, where she wakes up with her hair all chopped up and a tiara on her face. So that freaks her out. Julie keeps hearing, noises in her car when she's driving over to talk to Helen about whatever Helen just called her about this incident, where she stops and pulls over, and Max's body, what she was hearing was crabs, and Max's body is in the trunk. It's in the boot of the car, and he's covered in crabs. She screams, of course. She runs in there. Ray ends up, is it Ray or Barry? Barry ends up coming over. While they're in there, she gets them to go outside to prove it, only his body is gone. So she, poor little Julie, she ends up being accused of being batshit crazy a lot during these first two movies. So they get back, the body is gone. Barry ends up now assuming that it's Ray that's doing all this, and they have a fight. Blames him, but then Ray admits that he got a letter. Of course, we never see it, though. So this movie was really good about keeping you like, I don't know, who's doing what, which is what's good about it. Now, Helen and Barry agree to go and to the parade. They're going to go to the parade to see if they can spot who this is, while Julie is going to go to Missy's house with the yearbook, because Helen's sister was in the same year that this Billy Egan was in. So they're going to go and see if she recognizes anyone in this yearbook, because they still think it's got to be a friend of his. When Julie does get there, she asks Missy to find, the old friend, when she says that David, she wants to know why they want to know this. So she actually tells her, it's like, well, we're trying to find him, this friend, because we think something's going on. Now, this is when Missy informs her that, what murder? Because, Julie told her, like, we accidentally hit him, and we thought he was dead, and we dumped him in the ocean because we were afraid. And she's like, no, he left a suicide note, and he went up there to kill himself. No, we've never questioned that. The family, her, she had never questioned his death because she knew he had went up there to commit suicide. So she goes and gets the note, and she shows it to, Julie, but all it is the same note that all of them got. And that's when it sort of clicks in Julie's head that may have not been David Egan that they hit, because David had gotten a death threat too. Or that's what she called it to Missy. Missy don't want to hear none of it. The only reason she showed it to them was because it didn't matter now, because all of the money from the life insurance had been spent, and the reason that they had hid that note and the idea that he had topped himself was because of that. For the insurance money, that it would interfere with their insurance money. So that, I guess you would say, that theory was shot down from Julie and them. So they're like, okay, all right, so something else is going on here. Now, that's when Julie realizes that they did not hit him, that wasn't who they had hit. So Helen's at the contest to crown the next queen, Chowder Queen, I think they called it, or something like that. But clam chowder fishing village, something. It was that thing. So Helen's at the contest, and Barry's up there in the balcony watching over her. It was actually a pretty funny scene until, of course, Barry is attacked with a pretty brutal hooking murder. Helen freaks out. The sheriff goes up there to check her. She's, Barry's being killed up there. Please help. So the sheriff goes up there and they can't find anything. So he's like, you need to calm down and I'm going to take you home. So she agrees to that and she leaves to take him home. And there's some pretty, she uses some pretty colorful language. You probably really only hear it on First Amendment audit videos these days, but she pretty much calls him some nasty names for not believing her that this was going on. This is when we also then see that Julie is looking up information, researching for a new theory, when she discovers that Billy had been in a car wreck exactly 1 year before, on July the 4th. So 1 year before this occurred, they thought they hit him. 1 year before that, he had a wreck, and his girlfriend, Susie, was killed in that wreck. So that night that he got hit, when they thought that they had hit David, he had actually went up there to commit suicide on the anniversary because he blamed himself for Susie having died. During this research, she also discovers that Susie has a father named Benjamin, who is a fisherman. So while we're seeing her discover this, the sheriff, turns down a road and there is a truck that is stopped, broke down. So he gets out to help, whereas he gets gutted by Hook, the fisherman. I'm going to call him Hook. Be forewarned. He is Hook from here on out. So he gets killed nice. She manages to get out of the car, and this begins the epic. This begins the epic. Why am I getting pop-ups? I'm getting pop-ups on my computer. Some stupid program I have installed. So that threw me completely off the road that I was on. So this begins the epic Helen chase. So Helen is chased in a fantastic chase scene. She manages to get back to, where she works at her sister's, her family-owned business. The sister lets her in. She goes upstairs. Her sister ends up getting slashed at the front door. And, it continues up to the point. And I think what makes the Helen chase scene so phenomenal was because, first of all, you have in your mind that this is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So it's hard not to expect her to, pull some mixed martial arts and kick this dude's ass. It's hard not to think that while this is going on. But the part that makes it so amazing is that she gets that close to safety. After this huge, long chase scene, she gets within 15 feet of the fucking parade that is taking place right there. And coming out of this alley. So she is basically just 6 steps, just 6-7 strides, and she would have been out in the middle of the street amongst the hundreds of people. and she gets killed right there. So I think that's what made it, because you're like, that's just wrong to get that close to safety and to be killed. So Julie then goes and finds Ray, tells him about Ben, but then she kind of freaks out when she sees the name of the boat that he's on, Billy Blue. So he's the guy that had went and saw Billy way back, and he tries to explain that he didn't say nothing. He just went to her to give his condolences because he felt so guilty about killing her brother. But Julie's not having none of that because she's so fucking paranoid, right? So for a second, she believes that it's Ray and starts to back off. And she runs to this guy for help, who's like, yes, get on the boat, Well, that's fucking Ben right there. So he has her on the boat and takes off out into the water. And then we start having the showdown. So Ben has her. We start having the showdown on the boat. Ray jumps in a dinghy, fires it up, and goes after them. There's the scene where Julie finds all of the dead bodies, Barry and Helen and all in the ice cooler. Ray traps Ben in the ropes, which cuts off his hand, and he falls into the sea. Ben killed David. And that's what we know now. Ben was the one who killed David. So it was David's body that they found. Whereas our four protagonists, we thought that was David's body. They thought that they had killed David, but it was actually him who killed David, even though it was David's body that was found. Their body that they threw in the water was actually Benjamin. And he had survived and had come back to get them. So when that rope thing cuts off his hand and he falls into the water, and all that's recovered is his hand stuck in the fishing net, the cops are like, well, his body will wash up sooner or later. And they, of course, don't tell the whole truth about it all. And they can't find Ben's body. Julie ends up going back to college, where we see her taking a shower, and we see an "I still know" message on the steamed up mirror, and the movie ends, and it's a 10 out of 10. So I know there's a lot of people that don't like this movie, and there's a lot of people that do. I appreciate all of that. I love what I love for the reasons that I love it. It could have been gorier. It could have had more kills. It could have had, there's lots of stuff that if it was released today, I would give it a 7.5 out of 9. It's still a fantastic slasher. How could you have Ryan Phillippe in a gym locker room scene and not show his ass? That's just stupid and a waste of talent when the movie's already rated R. Come on. And all the other side, they don't get no boob shots or anything in this movie. So it does have some missing aspects of the classic slasher thing, but that's okay. There's lots of stuff that goes into making this my 10 out of 10, a 10 out of 10, and that is because of the nostalgia, the actors that are in it, the story, the cinematography, how everything works fine. And yeah, it's a 10 out of 10, and it will always be a 10 out of 10 because I know what you did last summer. It's just one of those things. And with slashers being my favorite subgenre of horror, slashers, killer kids, and vengeance, that's the top 3. So I'm always going to have a lot more love and leeway for what thrills me the most, like all of you. So yeah, that's I Know What You Did Last Summer. I will be back with the follow-up. And I'll just let you know right now, I fucking love all three of them. Yeah, I love all three of them. I love the third one too. So stay tuned to figure out how the fuck could he love that movie. Because I love that movie. It's really good. I Know What You Did Last Summer, 1997. And yes, I will see you in the next. Thank you very much for stopping by. Let me know what you think about this movie, where it sits in your pantheon of loves or hates, and reasons why, if any. And I will see you in the next video. Love you, miss you. Bye-bye. Always remember, never forget, you're a very, very special person. Even if you're not a psycho fisherman with a grudge. Bye-bye.